Hello everyone, welcome to this weekly update video for Monday the 16th of January, and this could be quite a long one, so we'll try and get through it as quick as we can. So the first thing is TFM airport database changes. So there's some new database methodology after there was updates from Paul Henty and with the library that's used, which essentially meant that a lot of TFM needed to be redone in terms of the airport's database usage. So that's what Andy's been doing over the past days. And that is coming to a point where it's relatively complete. The beginnings of it are in place. It's usable. Obviously, there's going to be expansions to it. So you'll need to now rebuild the database within TFM whenever you've rerun make runways. There'll now be a separate P3D and FS 2020 database path. And so you'll choose the path for the sim in question with browse. You'll navigate to where your files are. Of course, if this is P3D, you will have run make runways in your P3D main directory. If this is FS 2020, you will have run make runways outside of a directory. You might have it in your downloads, your documents, wherever the files are located. Then you're going to use the rebuild database button within TFM. Now the database size has been drastically reduced, and only relevant sections will be loaded, increasing speed of use and hopefully reducing any lag with the simulator itself. This involves the audio jittering issues that were experienced in 2020. This is not really an issue for P3D, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. The previous database, at least for FS 2020, was 3 gigabytes in size. And since TFM, of course, needed the position to be updated regularly because of the ILS readouts, this required a further 3 gigabytes of memory every 250 milliseconds. So, of course, I'm not saying that 3 gigabytes of memory continuously were being pulled. Windows is able to move things around and make dynamic changes so that you don't run out of memory. But the fact that 3 gigabytes worth of updates are essentially being pulled between the database, your current location, and TFM every 250 milliseconds, it's easy to see. While when you open the database dialog to select your airport ILS, for example, and even when you were using other dialogues like the CDU or panels, why it could cause the sim to lag. It was causing CPU overloading in some cases, and it was also causing a lot of work to be transferred onto the GPU. So especially in GPU intensive simulators like Microsoft, that is going to be a problem. The P3D database was smaller in size, and so that's why P3D users didn't really experience this lag, along with the fact that P3D is also less intensive anyway. Note that the airport search feature under the freeware flight planner procedures section that you were able to go to, where you could search, is no longer included. And the freeware flight planner itself is no longer included because all of these, despite the fact that the freeware flight planner didn't actually do anything, the airport search, as I say, isn't included. All of those would require significant work to be brought in line with the database changes that were made. Now, there are a couple of new points to note that have come as a benefit of this database change. The database will now allow TFM to tell you if you add an airport rather than add a city name or add a Bing Maps API key if you didn't put your API key in, if you will add an airport. So what this means is sometimes you will have noticed that if you, let's say, roll off the end of a runway, roll onto some grass off the side of the runway, you overshoot the runway and land on a taxiway, sometimes TFM will not tell you where you're at. But now it will. It will actually just tell you at the airport, whatever airport it may be. And this means that you're essentially on the airport perimeter, but you're not necessarily on the runway. I will just say about that, do be careful when submitting flights if you've landed and you're seeing that you're on the airport but not on the runway. Especially if your landing was not seemingly A-OK. You missed the glide slope, or you had some kind of crash into the ground, don't assume that just because it's saying on the airport perimeter, oh, that's fine, I'm just going to submit this. There are a lot of trackers out there, and the majority of them do not care, FS Airlines being one of them, whether you're on the runway or whether you landed on a taxiway or on the grass. They don't care. But just be aware that there will be other obstacles on the airport, so you may have hit something, there may be damage to your aircraft, and some trackers may care about it, and certainly if you're on VATSIM, of course, and things like that. I just don't want it to be a situation where people assume, well, I'm on the airport, so who cares? As long as the landing's okay, sure, submit it, but just be careful about that. Obviously, the aim is to land correctly. The other thing to note is that if you go to github.com/talkingflightmonitor/legacy, you will now be able to download the old legacy version, which no longer has support. You cannot send in requests, but it is there. And what does this have that is important? Of course, you're not going to be using this to fly your regular PMDG flights. It has the A2A support. So for aircraft like, I believe, the Cessna 172, the 182 Skylane, the Cherokee, the Piper Cherokee, the Bonanza, all those kinds of aircraft, if you are looking to fly those and you had the support from TFM previously, I know it's something that comes up every now and again, then you can go and download it there. So I know several people have it still on their drives in the community anyway, but if you don't, or you need to re-download it, that's where you can go and get that. Now, the 737 is still in progress, but is almost finished. There are some outstanding items requiring PMDG input, and alternate layouts for the FMC redesign are being explored. Not entirely sure what that last point means. I told you last week what I know about the redesign of the FMC with the toolbar ideas and things like that. If you want to listen to the latest we know about the FMC redesign, then go back onto the previous week's video. But so that is not going to be coming right at this second. But yeah, quite what that will entail. The sort of taking a look at the redesign again. I'm not too sure whether it's just small tweaks. The maintenance panel for the 747. This generally controls your electrical activity, so you can adjust various things. You can adjust from what source the APU will draw from at startup. You can run a ground power test, and there's other various hotkeys and indicators that you can read on the blog. Again, as always, I'm not going to list them all here. You'll just forget them, won't be much use. Go and read them on the blog. That's the best place. The FT-Sim version. This is no longer about TFM, I should add, but yeah, great work from TFM as always. FT-Sim has released the version 1.5 of their 737 sound pack for MSFS. This includes configuration changes to include cabin sound. So there's been some talk recently about PMDG adding a cabin soundscape. Looks like FT-Sim's trying to do that more himself. And if you install this, then you may be able to hear those sounds if you go to the cabin. I should add, we are not sure how to get to the cabin yet properly, or at least consistently. So if you know how to get to the cabin, or you have any ideas for how a blind user could get to the cabin from the cockpit with hotkeys to move the view through the cockpit door and out back into the cabin and kind of walk through the cabin, then that would be great. But if you can do that, you will see the dynamic soundscape. Nevertheless, there's other changes as well. New buzzsaw sounds and some changed pitches for N1 values, things like that. So you should notice some small adjustments there. I do know that the buzzsaw sounds are pretty good. I mean, I've heard them from the recent videos that a couple of streamers have done when they've been testing this out. And yeah, over the past few days, they do seem to be somewhat improved. The final thing to note is that the BVI virtual form is still out there in the BVI virtual group. If you want to find it, go into the group info and go to link and media, or links and media and docs, I believe it's called. You'll be able to see all the links that have been published in the group there, but the most recent of which will probably be the form. You can easily then vote on the next date for the event. The flights have already been decided. It will be Boston to Indianapolis to Charlotte. That will be at some point either at the end of January or middle of February. And yeah, this is in combination, hopefully, with some ATC from Indianapolis and their VATSIM division. So as always, just go vote on that. Should be open for about another week or so. other than that, I hope you have had a good week. And, as I say, if you want to read the hotkeys for the 747 panels, electrical and maintenance panel, you can view that on the blog. But essentially, the airport database has been the main point of discussion this week. There was concern that it was going to take a lot longer, but it sounds like Andy's been able to kind of pick up the pieces of the changes and make sure that TFM is now going to be able to do everything a lot faster, which is going to be a lot better. And there's been talk about the Where Am I feature being a lot quicker, and of course the removal of lag in Microsoft is going to be a big thing. There was people saying, okay, Microsoft is unusable until this is fixed. That's not the case. You can actually go and lower the process priority of TFM in your task manager, and then that should remove the majority of lag, even in the larger database versions, probably because it was essentially giving TFM less of a priority in terms of getting these database updates every 250 milliseconds, but it may also have resulted in slightly less accuracy. So it's a very good thing that we are hopefully going to be able to give TFM that the ability to pull those updates when it needs to, but also it's going to be of a lesser size, and that will not affect the simulator. So we'll see you in the next week's video, and have a great week.